Hello, Marcus Hummon.
My old friend, come to talk to you again. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, looky there. I love it. You and song are just hand in hand.
Yep, just all old songs, though.
Okay, we got to put this on your mouth.
Okay, on my mouth.
Yes,
There it is.
yes,
Yeah.
right
Okay.
there to
Okay.
your lips.
Okay.
I know. A lot of lips have touched that. William Michael
know,
Morgan's
yeah.
touched it yesterday.
Yeah, I'm going to stay away from it. Did he really?
Yeah.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah, because he was celebrating his #1. It was awesome.
Yeah, and they got a lot to celebrate.
They do. Engagements.
Engagement, how about that?
Which
Oh my
also,
gosh.
let's get right into it because I have a few questions I want to start off with a little
Sure.
rapid fire. But
Yeah.
speaking of William Michael Morgan being engaged to Jennifer Wayne,
Yes.
she's a part of Runaway June.
Yes.
She's also, they're going to be featured on this podcast soon.
Wonderful.
You and I actually had a little bit of
That's
I had a
right.
hand in it too, but it was mainly your genius. Wrote one of their songs they just cut, Blue Roses.
Yeah, both of us are really excited because you were part of the genesis of that group, really. And
Yeah.
you were there at the time,
It was
and we
fun
did
to be
a
a part.
demo together, and you were killing it on the demo. I got to tell you, I love Hannah. I love Hannah so much, but that demo, you really did a great job.
It was fun to get to sing that,
Yeah.
even
And,
though I can't sing low harmonies.
well, you say that. That's the thing you say. but
You're a great, when you have a great teacher, you can sing.
But they did it at the Opry,
Mhm.
and it was particularly beautiful that night.
Oh
you
my
know. The place was
gosh.
packed, and they got up there, and it's such that particular song is so country, and kind of bluegrassy, and leaning towards what they do, what they're like. I guess I was reading, maybe it was something you said, that it's the first female trio, correct, to break
In
the
10
top
years.
30 in 10 years.
Since the Dixie Chicks.
Which is unbelievable.
And oh my gosh, talk about the Dixie Chicks.
Yep.
You obviously have a thing for female trios who have some folk, root, soul,
Yes.
because you wrote a ton of the Dixie Chicks songs. Two of my favorites.
Well,
Ready to
I
Run.
wrote a bunch of them, but they only cut two. But they cut
Well, they cut two great ones.
two zingers. But
Ready to Run,
Run,
and my favorite song of all times.
yeah, Cowboy Take Me Away.
You
Yeah.
know, that song like imprinted me.
I didn't, but it's it's nice to know.
You know, like a little bird,
But
if
in a
you take
good
it from
way.
its mom, it imprints you, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it literally like imprinted my life. Cowboy
Yeah.
Take Me Away was my jam when I was in high school. It was
Yeah.
my favorite song. Dixie
Thank
Chicks were
you.
everywhere.
Yeah, they were special. You know, they were probably as good a group as I have known, and I've been in the business now for 30 years.
30
and-
years, but you're
Mhm.
only 45.
Yeah, sure. I'm only 45. I just like the sound of 45 now. That just sounds. It's funny because that sounds so young now. I know you're looking at like 45. You're like, oh man, that would be like I'd be dead.
No, time flies. I
Time
can't
really
believe I'm already
flies.
33. I remember when I moved to town at 19. It feels
33.
like
God,
yesterday.
so young. It's so wonderful. Enjoy it.
I am enjoying it.
Yeah.
But you
40s
have
are 40s are good though. I tell you, I'm in my 50s now, but I will say I think the 40s were really great. It's kind of an interesting time in a person's life. You know.
What is that time like?
I think it's cliched a little bit, but like you know yourself better. You're aimed at what you're aimed at in life. I think if
You're not like trying out a million things.
I don't
anymore.
think you're not. And if you've found your partner in life, usually all of that has settled, and you kind of, I think you're looking more for sort of the richness of that experience as opposed to your eyeballs are swinging around in your head, and that's all gone. Really, I mean that's kind of past, and by that time, if you're in a marriage, if you're fortunate enough to have a good marriage or whatever, then you've got kids, and then everything takes a different shape anyway, because that's a time that the kids are growing up, and it's kind of a wonderful period. You just every day is pretty exciting, and the 50s aren't bad. It's just that you get in the 50s and the kids that you loved so much are starting to go to school and leave home, and then
they're turning into adults.
they're adults, and if your folks are alive, they're they're really old, and they're in some cases struggling, and that's what I'm going through. And I know, but a lot of us in our 50s, I mean, that's when it happens for the most part. That's like my wife tragically lost her parents many years ago.
How tragically?
Well, an illness and a
Just wasn't prepared.
Yeah, and her dad died in a car accident. He was killed by a drunk driver.
Oh, man.
So she so she didn't she hasn't grown older, with parents, But anyway, I mean, I'm very thankful that my folks are still alive. But yeah, 50s is different, Just kind of settle in for it.
So really enjoy the 40s.
Enjoy everything. But
enjoy
yes, enjoy
every step of the way.
Enjoy it all, but enjoy the 40s. And don't be afraid. I guess more to the point, don't be afraid of the 40s. 40s will be good.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking, I want to, of course, go back, but since you mentioned this, you're
Yeah.
talking about having a spouse that you really
Yes.
have a beautiful relationship with. You and Becca
Mhm.
are amazing, and your wife is a preacher. Is that what we
Yes.
call it? A preacher? 'Cause
She's a priest. She's a
Priest.
Episcopal priest, but she does preach. But that's her job. She's the Episcopal chaplain at Vanderbilt. That's one of her jobs. And then the thing that she's kind of, in some ways, most well known for is she started a residential program for women who've suffered lives of trafficking through the prison system initially. And that program called Magdalene was different because the 2 years was different, and this sort of idea of radical hospitality was different. And now there's many, many cities in America that are actually bringing her in to consult and figure out why has that worked.
why has it worked?
Well, a lot of it has to do with it. Ultimately, she created a social entrepreneurial company called Thistle Farms,
Which is amazing.
Which is amazing. And the reason, and now that's the largest social entrepreneurial in the country for women with a history of who've been trafficked.
Products, like natural products.
Yes,
like
they
lotions
do. Beautiful products.
Chapsticks and
Yeah.
all sorts of incredible things. Candles.
Yeah.
and it gives
And
women jobs
gives them jobs and a living wage. It's not just about a wage. It's about a roof and a car and reconciling with families. And I think it part of that happened because she was building this 2-year residential program. Had some different ideas about how community can help women be released from the cycle of sexual abuse as kids. All of this is 100% the community that she works with, and then the cycle of being in prison and being out of the street and then back. Averaging 75 arrests. Really chronic.
Each person is averaging 75 arrests that she
yeah.
helps with. Because I guess once you get in the cycle, it's just hard to break it.
That's right. These are kids. I mean, this is what it looks like. It looks like abused probably before the age of 8, usually by someone close to you. It means you're on the street between 14 and 16 years old, and then you're trafficked, and then
So does traffic mean like you're sold for sex?
Yeah, prostitution, but it also there's a 1-to-1 relationship between that and addiction. Because
of course, once you get in there, I'm sure addiction's following right behind.
Yeah, or leading you there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes the other way. That it's how you.
Cope.
It's how the pimp's going to give you, your crack or whatever it is. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But it's everywhere. It's all over the world, but it's also in every city in America. And a lot of people don't know that, but it is. And so she leaned into that.
How did she decide to lean into that? Because that's a big lean.
Well, she's written several books on the subject, and she's been very public about it. So I would not ordinarily say this, but she suffered abuse when her dad died, someone in the church, when she was very young, and this went on for a while. But instead of sexual abuse, and instead of it kind of breaking her or sending her the way of the very people that she works with, the sisterhood that is Magdalene, that is Thistle Farms, and it could have. And I think she's always been real clear about that, that there's not a lot of difference. There really is no difference, It's just people.
What is that song? Drugs or Jesus? Like Tim McGraw said.
Yeah.
There's two roads sometimes when you have a hard decision.
Yeah.
Not drugs, but obviously. I don't know if that's a good comparison.
Well, but your point of that we're all. It's on a, it's fragile.
Very fragile.
People's lives are fragile, and we're easily broken. But it can come back together. I think for her it led her to be really focused on healing herself and others. And as long as I've known her, I mean, I met her and I moonlighted at divinity school years ago, and that's how I met Becca. And she was that way. I mean, she was that way at 25 years old. I'm telling you what. I mean,
she's had a mission to heal.
Yeah, I mean, the first date we had, I remember I met this girl, right? So I'm in Nashville and I'm trying to get a record deal, and I have a publishing deal, and I was thinking, I need to be with some people that kind of come from a little more similar cultural background.
Because you grew up as a citizen of the world.
Well, I grew up overseas, and my folks
in a million different places.
A lot
like
of places.
Philippines.
Yeah.
Where else did you live?
Well, I lived in Tanzania. So I should backtrack. My dad, his work was in international economic development. So,
That's amazing.
United States has embassies all over the world, and in what we used to call the third world, now you call, I think, the developing world. But part of our national interest in relationships with other countries is that we want to help and to pass back and forth economic know-how, and we want to be involved in development. And in other cases, there are places where America seems very concerned to have, for example, military, and all of the places that we that we're in relationship with, diplomatic relations, we have an ambassador. So my dad's interest was economics and economic development. He wanted
That's
to.
awesome.
So we lived in Tanzania, and then we lived in Nigeria, and then the Philippines, right when the Marcoses came in.
The Marcoses?
Marcos, Ferdinand and
Marcos.
Imelda Marcos, yeah. And then Dad worked, was in a political appointment during the Carter administration, the Jimmy Carter administration.
That's why you moved to D.C.
And that's when actually we moved to Saudi Arabia. So we lived in Saudi Arabia in 76 and 77 and part of 78. And I couldn't go to school in the kingdom because they didn't allow, after ninth grade, expatriate kids were not allowed to go to school in Saudi Arabia unless you went to a school, an Islamic school. And so I had a choice to either take correspondence courses at home, which I tried for a little bit, but that was kind of goofy. And then the only other choice was I had to leave home.
How
So
old
I
were
went.
you?
I was 16. I turned 17 in Italy.
Gosh,
So
Marcus.
and you got to remember, those are the days. It wasn't like there was no cell phone. Or I remember when I got to Rome. I went to school.
You went to school in Rome?
I did. I actually went to Notre Dame International, which is a high school that is run by the same Brothers of the Holy Cross that run Notre Dame University. Even though I happen to not be Roman Catholic, but that was a fantastic school, and it's one of these schools, international schools that, and of course I grew up in international schools where you'll have American curriculum, and you'll have like half the kids at the school will be whatever the country is. So half the kids are Italian, and the other half are kids from literally all over the world, who are looking for a great school. Many Americans, folks with Exxon, and it might be with Lockheed, it might be State Department people, all kinds of people. But it's kind of a crazy thing.
It's incredibly crazy.
But I went there for a year, and then my dad was restationed back to the United States, and so we went back. And I never lived abroad again. My parents lived in Botswana for many years.
So they love Africa.
They love Africa, and I traveled to Botswana a fair amount, and I'm still, through our church, I'm still in relationship with an organization, actually a hospice in Botswana, that and we raise money for them. We have a thing called The Greatest Show Ever we do every year, which is a night of impersonations. I host it. It's for dead artists and dead careers.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
Marcus.
sadly we have a lot of new folks who've
Oh.
added to the lineup.
I know.
I know. I'm going to do Leonard Cohen though.
Okay.
Yeah, I got to do Leonard.
I just need to backtrack just a little
Sure.
bit. What did you gather from living in all of these different countries with all of these different cultures in such a pivotal point of your life when you're developing? Like, obviously you're preteen, teen, and you're living in all of these different cultures. What is that like, and what did that do to your thought process?
I don't know. I mean, that's big. Those are good questions. They're big questions. I mean, probably an appreciation of diversity. When you have a lot of friends you have friends who are Muslims, you have friends who are, Buddhists, you have friends who are, it can break along nationalities, it can break along race. You have friends who are Italian, you have friends who are Africans, you have friends, you just sort of, that's the world that actually is there. And so you live in that, and
You're
you're
all just humans.
yeah, and you're proud of your country. You're proud to represent your country, because my folks used to say, just remember you're representing your country. But like, to give you an example, like when we lived in Saudi Arabia, I mean, my mom's just like from a small town in Michigan, and she was studying Arabic, in a country that in the 70s and now that has, by Western standards, their laws towards women, were not, that wasn't a pretty sight. She wasn't allowed to drive.
Really?
She couldn't wear her skirts had to have her dresses had to be long sleeved, had to be down to her ankles.
Did she wear something over her head?
She had scarves, but she didn't have to do like a hijab or whatever, abaya. We call them abaya.
Like her.
Yeah, basically just Westerners, but what that tells you is that, my folks really gave me a sense that, we were guests in host countries, and that we should be respectful as we could, of other people's traditions and their cultures. And so I guess that's certainly one thing, and that, affected me. I think musically, I already had parents who were kind of, I grew up, my parents listened to, oh God, they had so much folk music. It was all like, Bob Dylan and I don't know, Pete Seeger and Joan Baez and all this stuff. And then they listened to classical music. They were they had met in choir, so they listened to a lot of choral music. And then they were bonkers over Broadway music. So, they really were.
You've also written 6 Broadway musicals, which is insane.
Well, I haven't been on Broadway, but I've done off Broadway stuff.
But
I've written
6 musicals.
I've written musicals.
And 3 have been on off Broadway, right?
Yeah, and I've
also wrote an opera.
Wrote an opera for Nashville Opera Company.
And you also wrote a children's book, and you've also done a documentary. Your
still
creativity is overflowing from you.
Yeah. Well, you're having fun. It's part of the fun.
You're just a very creative person, and you're very smart too. Like, that's the thing about you. I've gotten a chance to write songs with you and like be around you now for years. Something about the way that you were raised, like maybe what you said, like you understand diversity and you appreciate it, mixed with how smart you are, mixed with your love of folk and very good lyrical music with great melodies. The way you write songs is literally unlike anything I've ever experienced.
Well, that's really sweet of you to say that. And you and I, we've had some, we've done some music together too. That's one.
I love doing
really
music
great.
with you.
I don't know how your fans, but I'm sure they know this about you. But you're a very, very good musician.
That's not true.
That is true. You have a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
And you have a great sense of music.
Well, when I'm with a great teacher, like I said
You said
before.
you struggle with, harmony's a funny thing, because I'm a harmony, I'm just nutso about harmonies. But
you can hear like 17 different harmony parts.
I don't know. I hear, I started writing choral stuff. One of the latest projects, I was commissioned a couple years ago to write a cantata, so a passion cantata for the church. So the Episcopal Cathedral said, we'll give you some bucks. And I started working over at Belmont with this group called the Chamber Singers and Dr. Dean Ensminger. And I don't really read music except Nashville-style numbers, and I'm an ear player on piano and different instruments.
Yeah, you play a lot of instruments.
Play a few instruments, but I also got into this process because I was writing theater through the years. I started to get this idea that I wanted to do my own harmonies, and then begin to think of it in terms of choral music. And so got into this process and built some relationships at a couple conservatories where I could send files where I would duplicate. I might sing 4-part, SATB, and then I would triple or quadruple each part.
Soprano, alto, tenor, bass.
Yeah,
SATB.
but I should say this. I know this because right now I've been working with a 100-person choir at Belmont.
Oh my
gosh,
you're working with 100 people at one time?
Last week we recorded something, and then this Friday we're going to finish. We're putting the other 50 kids in the room because we couldn't get all 100 in. And I'm working with the conductor, arranger, professor, Dr. Jane Warren on this one, and she's actually taken my choral arrangement, which was transcribed at the Hart Conservatory. That's how I do it. And then she has actually added some parts so that we could have true true soprano parts. So, for example, I mean, yeah, I can do SATB falsetto, and then early in the morning I sing bass, and I'm a natural tenor. And but that actually, there is a range of singing that is I can't do it, and because my painting, my colors, my paintbrush is just my voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I write. I write by
that.
singing everything, and spend a lot of time on it. But it's a super fun thing. And this year we published the National Church, Episcopal Church, has just released a book actually called The Passion. I called it The Passion. And Becca and I, my wife and I, wrote a little book about each of the 6 movements within the cantata, and then attached to it is the CD itself.
Dang.
Called The Passion, and CTM, my ex-publisher, they put it out as an album, and then you can buy like the score. You can buy each, so it's going to churches, and
that's amazing.
Because sometimes a passion narrative or a passion is really something that is done on Palm Sunday, because on Palm Sunday in the church, you don't have an Easter song, although I added one anyway. What the heck, get the guy out of the grave, right?
Right.
But at Palm Sunday, it ends on the cross. That's it, right? So when we think of Lent, we think of the season of Jesus coming to Jerusalem, which of course ends in his death. And those famous stories, the Last Supper, Gethsemane,
you know so much.
Trials.
Do you know so much?
No, you know what it really was, Caroline? It was really fun because when they asked me to do it, of course, whenever I get offered something like that, I always just say yes, and then I kind of figure out how to do it.
I love that. I love that.
I mean,
philosophy.
might as well. I mean, otherwise, how are you going to have any fun? But I thought it was fun to go back. I'm not a big Bible reader. I'm not
But you must have like a photographic memory because you pretty much know all the stories. Just from this little conversation, I can tell.
This little conversation is because that was 2 years ago, and to do the piece, I went back and
you had to learn your material.
Well, I went back to the 4 Gospels and said, well, it's like a libretto, right? It's like a script or a lyric. If like for a cantata, a cantata is just an extended work for voices and instruments.
Okay.
And so it's a 45-minute piece, So I had to go back and kind of go, well, wait a minute. Okay, what does each gospel say about this occurrence, and also
how to make it into
how
music.
do I make it into music? Exactly. I mean, and who are the characters? Now let's think of them as characters.
So you read it like you were studying
a
playwright.
Script.
Yeah,
that's correct. Yeah.
I love that.
Well, it made for, and that was part of what I wanted to write about in that little book, is that I realized, because I'd come out of theater now, and because I was a roots writer, I mean, if I'm writing country, folk, bluesy stuff.
That's where your heart is musically.
Yeah, and that's being like a populist, like folk meaning voc, like of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So you think, well, okay, so then you take that lens and you point that at Lent and Jesus. And for me, it's really, really hard to write for some transcendent creature whose mind you can't fathom.
Like God?
Like God, like looking at Jesus in those terms as you write music.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at things like, if you look at Jesus and you say something like that, if you think of Jesus as standing in Gethsemane and saying, and somebody, I guess, hearing it, right, in theory, because that's why they wrote it down, he knows what's coming, and he says, let this cup pass from me, and goes through kind of a thought process which we have written down for us in the Gospels, but then at the end of that says his process, he moves through his prayer, and he says, but not your will, but not my will, but yours. So as a writer of theater and as a person, who looks for emotion in a situation, I understand the emotion of what I think is being afraid.
Right.
I don't think you say, let this cup pass me, unless you're maybe pretty clear that, one of the most brutal, oppressive nations ever, Rome,
mm-hmm.
is going to, you're in for some serious persecution. And so that to me is that you can write to that.
Yeah.
I can write to that.
So you need a story. So how important is faith in your music or in your life?
I don't know. I mean, I guess about as important as anything, I guess. I mean, I think about the term faith, what do I have faith in?
What do you have faith in?
I don't know. Sort of, probably, I think fundamentally I would say I have faith that there's a loving God. I think that's probably kind of number one.
Even in the world with all the chaos, how do
Yeah.
you know there's a loving God?
I do not.
You just have decided to believe.
Yes. And I also,
Have
you know,
you seen truth and signs of it?
yeah. Oh, sure. All the time. In the courage of people and the love that of one another, and also in the beauty of the, you know, for like the great hymn, for the beauty of the earth. I see signs all the time. I see other things too. And I also have, like a lot of people, like probably all of us, I have a lot of times where that faith is shaken, or people refer to dark nights of the soul, or that you're kind of in dialogue with it. It's almost, to me, it's a little more, the way I interpret faith might be more like a choice.
Okay.
I choose to think of a loving God, and for the most part, I believe it. I choose to believe that, you know, that there is a, as Martin Luther King said, you know, the arc of history is bending towards justice. I choose to believe that, even when sometimes evidence would appear to the contrary. And that's good. I don't know how to put it differently.
I love that.
I'm afraid it's a little,
No, I love that.
like kind of oddly existential position
No.
without a lot of proof.
I think faith doesn't have a whole lot of proof sometimes. It's
Sometimes,
a feeling.
yeah.
Okay, so I want to get back to your music a little bit.
Yeah.
So you grew up in all these amazing countries.
Yeah.
You're a citizen of the world. You understand diversity. You
I appreciate it anyway.
Appreciate it. Your parents have this great musical catalog that they listen to. You
Yeah.
grew up playing instruments, writing songs. When did you start writing songs? How old were you?
You know, it was sporadic. I can remember writing. I don't know. I think I was 11 in Nigeria. It was the first time I ever did anything musical. I had a friend who was Pakistani guy. Well, half Pakistani. His mom was English. Navid Birney, and I remember he's a very good guitar player and he was a good singer. And he wanted to form a band. So I like to play drums. So we had all these. But when I say drums, it wasn't a drum kit. I had a bunch of African drums.
Like bongos in a way?
Well, they're bigger than bongos. There were some about that size, but
Okay,
I mean,
like-
some are kind of large. But they're
Yes.
just, you know, they're wooden carcasses with a, you know,
Mhm.
stretched skin over it. And then in Nigeria, they had things called talking drums too, where the skin draped over the wood is actually held together on both ends by string or hide that, you know, rolled into string. And what you do is, as you play the drum with a stick, you actually press the strings around it, and it makes the and actually they're talking drums because you can actually
Make them say words?
you can create language out of it.
That's that's
Yeah.
crazy. So you started a band when you
So
were very
yeah,
young.
so when we were actually on TV, I had one little moment on TV, and yeah, I was drumming. So my first,
So that was the start.
my start was actually and I never. It's funny because I never really have been asked that actually, and I'd forgotten that's the case.
So
I
you
did
were say your age.
10 or 11.
Was music in your family?
1971, I believe.
Like, were
it
your
was.
parents musical? Or
Very musical.
But
Both,
that wasn't their career.
no. But they met in choir, and my mom was to this day, she's a very good pianist. My dad's a good piano player. My mom reads music really well. She can play a pipe organ too with pedals.
Dang, organ is hard to play.
And then she grew up playing, I think, clarinet, and Dad also grew up playing trumpet.
You are definitely from a family of savants. I don't think savants know they're savants, though. I think that's the key here. It's like, you know, what do they say? Sometimes she doesn't know that song, She Don't Know She's Beautiful.
She don't know she's beautiful.
You don't know you're a savant.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean,
You
I
just
think
know
we're all,
so much stuff.
You know, really, I don't know, Caroline. That's very sweet of you. I think the thing that might be different is, you know, if you grow up in a lot of different places, you end up having sort of a variety pack of ideas about.
Are you so glad that you got to grow up all over the world?
I am. Yeah. I mean, I know that when I was a kid, sometimes we used to fantasize. I used to fantasize about the kind of small town America life that my parents had, you know, who grew up. My mom grew up, and her dad was had a dairy store. My father's folks, my grandfather was a farmer. And I think even when I first got to Nashville, some of the first recordings I ever did that sounded real country or that leaned into kind of really an upbringing I didn't have was about fantasizing about an Americana existence that,
interesting.
you know, there was a song that the very first, I had a lot of record deals that didn't happen.
So how old were you when you moved to Nashville?
So I went to college and I finished college, and I was a year older than everybody because I'd been held back in Italy. You know, I mean, I didn't, when I was in Saudi, I was held back in Saudi Arabia. I graduated at 19 and then went to college. So I was a little bit older. So the whole thing happened later for me. I didn't get serious about music until college.
Really? So you just were in bands enjoying it, but you didn't know that was going to be your profession?
I was never in a band. And, you know.
Well, your first band with your Pakistani friend.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's right.
And then you were also in a band with your sisters. You also had a little band with your sisters called, you had Harmony, and then Red Wing.
Well, these are all stretched over a very, very long period of time. So the band I played music with this kid, Navid. But then music throughout up into high school and into college for me was periodically I got really interested in guitar. And then I studied guitar a little bit, again, kind of intermittently. And whenever I took up the guitar and was developing my own style of playing, for whatever reason, I always wrote songs. It's just like those two things were completely linked.
Hand in hand,
yeah,
songwriting and playing guitar.
And playing guitar. And then, but I wouldn't say I took it particularly seriously. I never thought of it like professionally. I remember when I was in the Philippines at 15, I was lucky enough. I took lessons from a guy named Sammy Climaco, who was a big rock star in the Philippines at the time. And he was great. And then when he kind of, and then briefly I went to a guitar institute when I was in the Philippines.
Nice.
Which is really wacky because it was a guitar institute in the Philippines. My teacher was Japanese, and he was teaching American.
Your life is a movie. Can we make a movie about it? Have you written a musical about your life?
No.
That's your next one.
But he taught American four-finger roll kind of technique, and it's a particular technique that I, use to this day. And
so you have a lot of influences in your guitar playing.
I do actually.
World influences.
I think I have. Paul Simon's guitar playing. He was the guy that played that fingerstyle. He was probably, he and James Taylor are probably my favorite fingerstyle players. But I also love rhythmic groove guitar. And so that would, I don't know where I got, maybe Richie Havens, that kind of real, kind of just groove. And I loved Bob Marley, and I loved, a lot of Afro pop too, where rhythmic ideas are used in a different way.
Then you bring all that to country music. So you get serious about it in college, and then you go, okay, I'm moving. I know you go to LA for a minute, and then you decide to relocate to Nashville, and you're like, I'm going to do this in Nashville. You get to Nashville, you get a publishing deal right away, and you get a song cut by Wynonna, Only Love.
Well, that takes a little while. So, because that's a
Only Love was a big song.
Yeah, so that's a few years away. But yeah, I get signed. I'm only 25. I get here in 80s, but I get here in 86, so I don't get that cut until 90, I think.
Okay, so you're here like 4 years.
Yeah, and then before then, I actually have a record deal.
On Columbia?
No. So
Who's on?
Well, here's the thing that you wouldn't necessarily know, because I had several record deals.
How many record deals did you have?
I think Columbia was. Honestly, I have to go through them, but I think it was the fifth. There was
let's start at the beginning.
MTM. There was an art. These are development deals. Okay. So this is a different time.
Development deals mean they sign you and they're going to just watch you develop to help you grow.
Well, they put money into you, and the classical development deals that we don't see much of anymore.
Right.
Was that you would sign a deal, and the deal would sort of also you'd be required to sign something that you're going to sign the larger deal. Okay.
Right.
So you're already kind of chained to it. And then they're going to give you like $12,000 or $15,000, and you're going to co-cut like 3 to 4 sides. And this period is going to happen over a 6 to 9 months period of time. Then they're going to have the first option. They're going to have the right. No one else can make a decision on them.
They can take you, or they can decide to let you go.
That's correct. And if they take you, then the other thing clicks in that the basic deal that you've already
record deal.
you've already agreed to.
So the development deal.
So you
then
still have to
turns
do a contract
to a record deal.
in theory,
Right.
or not. And so
Okay,
I had a
so-
series of or nots.
Who were the or nots?
So actually, the first or not is not fully my fault. The first or not and the first real record deal was Mary Tyler Moore Records, right?
You knew Mary Tyler Moore?
I did. I never met her. I was signed by Tommy West, who was Jim Croce's producer, and he was at this label, and the label had Judy Rodman and the Forrester Sisters.
Oh wow!
And Trisha Year was the actually she was the gal at the front desk.
No way!
Yeah.
That was the front desk she worked at.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
way!
And they had Paul Overstreet.
So did you see Trisha Yearwood?
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely.
She was like answering phones.
Yes, and I remember somebody saying, by the way, she really sing a demo if you need anyone for a demo. So if you got a chick song, or you get Trisha. No, I remember. In fact,
how cool that you were in that part of history.
I tell you, I met Garth for the first time. I'm the last person in Nashville who's been around this long to meet Garth, but because I'm working on a movie that we needed to interview, and he was gracious enough to give an interview, and we met at the Bluebird for the filming of this thing. It was just a few weeks ago, and I was like, I remember Trisha when she was at the front desk, and it's wild to have when you're around a long time, you've seen a lot of different people. But yeah, no, I was on that label, and they had the reigning female vocalist of the year was Judy Rodman, so it was a real serious company. And their publishing side, because they took up part of my publishing, that's the way those deals were those days. You had to give up, But they had, I remember they had Foster and Lloyd's Faster and Louder album, which became a seminal kind of country rockabilly. I mean, if you're not familiar with that record, Faster. I mean, that period of time, the late '80s. I mean, that's when everything exploded. Because prior
you were in the big middle of it.
Well, I was, but just dumb as a stone about it. I mean, in a way,
who isn't though when they're in their 20s?
Well, I didn't know anything, and I even remember I had a guy once. I won't say what his name is, but in my first publishing deal in Nashville, I had one of the head guys called me into his office and said, you should leave.
Nashville?
You should leave. Yeah, he said you should leave, and he's like, you're not hillbilly. And what we do here is make hillbilly music, and he says you should go. And I remember he said to me, he goes, you know who you remind me of? And I was like, oh God, And I said, oh, who? And he goes, well, you remind me of Dan Fogelberg. And I was like, wow, well, thanks for that. And he goes, that's not a compliment.
Because he was saying that's not going to make any
he goes, I hate Dan Fogelberg.
Why does this guy get to be the authority?
Well, he just was at the time. Without telling you who he was, I mean, he had a lot going for him. Now, I'll tell you this about this guy. Years later, after sticking it out as I did for a long time, and then beginning to have hits.
And let's not forget, you did ultimately win Song of the Year with God Bless the Broken Road for Rascal Flatts, win a Grammy. We got to get into your song resume here after this, because it's huge and amazing.
Yeah. He actually, I remember seeing him on the street, walking around Music Row, and he came up to me and said, by the way, he goes, I just want you to know I was wrong about you.
Oh, well, thanks.
Well, I mean, little victories in life, Yeah. But on the other hand, he was
after you've won a Grammy, gotten all these Dixie Chicks songs, number one. Oh, I was wrong.
Well, he was
just kidding. That's nice
he was
said that.
partly right in one sense, in the it didn't come. I didn't grow up in country music. But I had a couple things that I could hold on to. One is that folk blues are not very different. Not really, not to me. And if you're a lyricist and you're a piano player and you like guitars and you play mandolin and later you like to pick up the banjo, you're going to be all right.
You play all those instruments.
Yeah, but doesn't mean I play them all well, but I play a couple of them pretty well. But, it was the right place to be. I think it was not the right place
Maybe
as an
you were
artist.
ahead of your time. Because now country music's pretty wide open.
Or solidly backwards. I think that a friend of mine, my dearest co-writing buddy is Daryl Scott, and most longtime compatriot in this business, and he has said to me many times, he said, you're just, you grew up in the 70s, and really everything you do just sounds like the 70s.
Which is awesome.
And that's kind of true.
You need to write with Midland. The new band out. Their whole
really?
band feels like throwback 70s. Yes.
Wow.
I'm going to try to hook that up.
Hook it up, Caroline.
Really a good combo. I think, they say every 30 years trends repeat. I'm telling you. So
maybe I'm going to come back into vogue.
It's about to be Marcus Heyday Part 2.
Maybe.
Marcus Hummon's heyday part 2.
Well, you know, but
you never
things continue. You know, you get, you know, it's been a while since I've had a number one.
Well, you're probably about to have one with Blue Roses with.
We are
Runaway
totally. Give it
Junes.
right here. Wait,
Yeah,
folks, this is us booming our fist
just
pumping.
putting it out there in the universe.
That's right.
Tell me though why that first development deal wasn't your fault that you lost it. You never said why it wasn't.
Oh,
your fault.
that's right. Yeah, because there was a series of them. There was RCA and I was with the original Arista label.
So you had major labels.
RCA was on
Pounding
RCA.
you.
No, they were all majors. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
Liberty. I literally the fifth one was Columbia, and that was Paul Worley and Scott Simon, are friends of mine. And there's an old saying that, you know, if you stick around long enough, your friends become record presidents, then you get deals. But that's kind of what happened to me. And then unfortunately, right in the middle of the development of my album, they left. And so as you know, I stayed very close to both of them, but Paul Worley cut more
Which
hits
actually
for
probably led to a great relationship with him when he started producing the Dixie Chicks.
Oh no, a number of things. The Sara Evans.
Oh, and he produced Sara Evans.
He produced Sara,
which you had a huge hit with Sara Evans.
Yeah, Born to Fly.
Born
yeah.
to Fly. That was her first single, right?
No,
One
her
of the first
big song was 3 Chords and the Truth.
Oh.
And that was her first solo album, but Born to Fly was the first one. I mean, that was nominated.
I'll never forget when that
video
video
came out. For Song of
out.
the Year. I mean, it was a serious.
That's when I like put. To me, that's when Sara Evans got put on the map. She
that was
so beautiful.
That was a groovy record too.
Yes, and that song was amazing.
Yeah, and Paul. See, the other thing about Paul is that Paul always let me play guitar, on the record. So, you know, when we did Ready to Run or we did Born to Fly, you know, that I got to play acoustic guitar and do that little groove thing, you know, and I remember
it changes the whole song because no one can play guitar like you. Really, they can't.
Well, thank you. I mean, I guess. I mean, I think there is something about it, you know, that some songwriters, and I'm not at all the only one. There's many who they're really tied to the instrument that they compose with, and yeah, it's
a part of the song.
It is true that sometimes to get that actual feel, you know, you do go to the kind of the source of whatever the
Yes.
central groove is.
Same way like a vocalist. Certain vocalists, you know, have such a distinct sound that only that person can sing
That's
it.
right.
It's the way you play guitar.
Well, I tell you, I know that, like, again, a guy he's got more instruments, and I think he's farther along than I am, I think, is Daryl Scott. And I know that through the years that often when people would cut his songs, they'd cut, I think when Travis Tritt cut Great Day to Be Alive.
Oh, I loved that
He was smart
song.
enough to bring Daryl in
Did Daryl
to play.
write that song?
Oh, yeah, 100% that one.
He wrote that song all by
100%.
himself?
Yeah, it's on his album Aloha from Nashville. And but he also was the other writer on Born to Fly. So,
Wow.
and actually we got a cut yesterday.
What?
With it's called I Need a River, and I wrote it with Daryl, and it's very and Sonia Isaacs actually, and Sarah had called me, and she's cutting a new record this
Sara
week.
Evans?
Uh-huh.
So you got a cut with Sara Evans yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, and
congratulations.
but it's one of my favorites, and I keep a running list of, like, I got like 20, 30, 40 songs, like a list.
Of your favorites?
Yeah, that haven't been cut.
That's smart because sometimes you might forget if you don't keep it at the top of your head.
That's right. And then you go back, and I've realized that, I mean, periodically, you know, you're long enough in the business, people will occasionally. I mean, I would love it if Blake Shelton and some of these the more bro country guys, if I knew them and they wanted to hear my songs. I don't know them, and they don't ask me for them, but you know, but a Sara Evans will, and there are different artists that will come my way, and they'll say, you know, and I can pitch, and I'll look back.
And you know your list.
But I keep them, and
Yeah.
and she actually wrote me a note, and she said, you know, I need another song that's sort of like it lives in the land of Born to Fly, and I was like, got it.
Oh my God, I can.
And I went back and I was like, it was on an album. The last album I did, Daryl actually produced an album on me called Rosanna. And I cut a few hits, but then I cut a bunch of stuff that I just do, that are new songs that I dig, you know.
That you just love.
That I love. And that I've always loved that song. And I've always scratched it, but kind of a head scratcher.
Like, why has it not found its home
Yeah,
yet?
and I would try to pitch it. I've pitched it before. I think I've actually pitched it to Sarah before. The difference
Maybe it
was
just
that
wasn't the right time.
it wasn't the right time. Plus, it wasn't direct. I think I probably went through a gatekeeper. And in this one, she just, you know, as she does periodically, she'll just come right to me and say.
So much better to be able to pitch directly to the artist.
Yeah, and you get an immediate answer, you know,
Yes.
or immediate silence.
Yes.
If nobody says anything, you know what that means.
Right, it's a no.
That'd be your country western.
I want
no.
to run through some of your songs
Okay.
you've written. Okay, so you wrote Alabama Cheap Seats, which I freaking love that song. You've written songs for Hal Ketchum, Patty Loveless. What'd you write for Patty Loveless?
I wrote "Over My Shoulder" is a song I wrote for Patty.
I love Patty.
And Roger Murrow, I think, was the other writer on that.
And you wrote for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and then you've also you broke onto the songwriting scene with "Only Love" for Wynonna.
Yes.
Amazing. You've also wrote "One of These Days" for Tim McGraw, which went to number 2.
Yeah.
"One of These Days You're Gonna Love Me."
Yeah.
That song.
But you got to go R&R. It went to number 1 in R&R.
Okay.
The reason you have to count that
is
that I count those things because BMI gives you a cup.
Yes.
And I was reading a thing recently. I was doing some show and it said like, I don't know, it said like 3 number 1s, and I was like, hey, come on now,
give me. Where did that song come from? Because that is one of the sweetest, most sensitive, and like, it's kind of like almost not like anti-bullying song, but it is like.
Well, it is really in a way.
It is.
Yeah.
I remember when that song came out. I bought the whole album for that song. I didn't even know you then.
That's sweet of you. That's that was the center. That was the hub on the with the spokes around it for my album. The album, All in Good Time. I remember when we first started to build that record, I was like, one of these days, every song has to relate to this song.
Did you know that song was important?
Yeah, I knew. I mean, I did. I tell you, the one I didn't know was going to be big was on that same album, the original. The first piano version of "Bless the Broken Road," and when
God bless, and that has an interesting story because
and when Jeff and I wrote it, Jeff Hanna.
Okay.
I was on piano, and when he had gotten back from his honeymoon, and so that whole rolling, the very specific piano part that's on it, is central to the song. When the Dirt Band did it, and the point of that writing that song was to get on Jeff Hanna's record. So I had sung at his wedding. I sung "Only Love" at Matresa Berg,
who's another huge
famous
songwriter,
Hall of Fame songwriter. Jeff Hanna, their wedding, they went on a honeymoon, and I knew that I was going to get to write with him on when he got back. And I'd had this conversation at a bar with this guy Bobby Boyd, who just had, my recollection is just was such an inspirational, kind of interesting thing that he said about his life that I wanted to make that
and he said,
into
"God
a
bless
song.
the broken road."
No, it wasn't that kind of thing. It was really talking about it's one of those stories you almost don't want to tell it, but he was talking. He was in the middle of a hard time in his marriage, but he'd found this other person who subsequently they've been married and for years. And what he really said to me at the time was he was kind of talking about things he would do differently, and being honest about feeling bad about some things that had happened. But then he kind of, what I recollect of it is he kind of stopped right in the middle of it, and he just said, when I think about it though, I know this person is this new person is the person I love, and I was meant to love. This is my soulmate. And so I guess I don't know. I guess I wouldn't change anything, and that's what struck me about. That's what I remember. It's not like some cataclysmic thing, but
it inspired this whole song.
Yeah.
Which that song, then, this is what I love about Nashville.
Right.
You wrote that song, and not until like 7 years later, or was it longer?
Oh, longer. Well, so
like
the
9?
Song was written. The song was first recorded in '93.
And when did it make its way to Rascal Flatts? 2005.
Well, 5 or 6, somewhere in there was the release. And
so you wrote the song in 1993, and then not until
20 years. No.
15?
15 years
I
later.
can't do math. So like 15 years later, it made, whoever's listening to this, y'all do the math.
Yeah, 7.
A lot of
7
years.
and 5, 12.
12, 15, 20,
Yeah.
tomato.
So 22 years ago.
22 years ago. It makes its way. So 12 years after you write.
24 years ago. I'm just doing math as we sit here. Yeah, so it's a long time ago.
It makes its way
yes.
to Rascal Flatts.
That's right.
And then it goes on to become Song of the Year.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to win a Grammy.
Yeah.
How crazy is that? A song that you wrote 12 years all the way now making it to the top of the top. You can't get bigger than Song of the Year winning a Grammy.
No, I mean, all I remember is it was great. I mean, I'd lost a Grammy once before. I lost for Ready to Run for Song of the Year. And it was...
And Ready to Run for the Dixie Chicks was also in a huge movie.
Yeah, it was. The funny thing is now there is a song that actually sat at number 2 in both of those charts, R&R and Billboard. In those days, they used to, before they combined, it used to be that you had to get one or the other, and then that's when they give you the little silver cup from BMI. Then you'd get a party and all that. And Ready to Run was, was tough because it was massive, and it.
What movie was that in with Julia Roberts?
Oh, Runaway Bride.
Runaway Bride.
Runaway Bride.
Yes,
But
that was so good.
But that record, there was all this attention to like what's going to happen with Fly, because the first one, went diamond.
Diamond.
And,
that means it sells 10
the first
million
album went diamond, and
no one does that anymore. Barely.
No one has. I mean, they're still the biggest selling female group in the history of country music for sure. But they, we're talking about a group that when Fly went out, I mean, now it's like 15 million or something like that now.
Wowzers.
For a country group that really, whose career in country kind of ended because they pissed off the most powerful man in the world. I mean, you have to realize, how big it was. And I didn't see it.
And then they just abruptly ended.
But I didn't see it coming at all. I mean, I'm not talking about the President Bush stuff, but I knew that they were good and all, but, I knew that they were really good. And
but you just never know what's going to happen.
You don't know. I mean, and I never got on the inside of the Garth thing or the inside of any of the Shania thing. I didn't catch a wave, but with the Chicks, I caught the wave.
You caught the wave.
You caught the wave hard, and we had the first
and
two
then Cowboy
singles.
Take Me Away.
I mean, back
huge.
to back, it was unbelievable.
What was that time of your life like?
Well, it was crazy, and I remember I flew down to Dallas. I had my uncle. I used to spend time with I had a real uncle I was really close to. And I saw them perform, I don't know, 30,000 people. And I'd never really experienced a concert where, people look like they're falling out, like they're having a religious experience, and to your songs. And it's heady. I mean, it's trippy to see it. It puts into perspective some bad stuff too.
Like what?
Well, the last record deal I did was I did the Columbia record, and then afterwards I started a little record company, a digital company with Scott Simon called Velvet Armadillo.
Which I love.
I started to put out records, and I was starting to write theater, and I'd make records of that, and so consequently there's all kinds of records. I mean, I still think the Sound of One Fan Clapping is probably that and Rosanna are the best records I ever made. The first one I ever made was the Sound of One Fan Clapping, which was almost picked up by EMI, but it was not going to be a country record. And then I met this guy, Stuart Adamson, and he was and this relates to what I'm saying about 25,000 people screaming at you. Stuart Adamson was the lead guitarist and singer and the sole writer for the group Big Country, a Scottish rock group. In a big country, dreams stay with you like a lover's voice. It's a huge, massive worldwide hit. It came out about the same time as Bono. Prior to that, he'd been a guitar player for a group called the Skids, kind of a seminal punk band. Anyway, this guy, working class Scottish guy, right? Tall, handsome dude, brilliant guitar player, like crazy, right? And he moves to Nashville. He's in the middle of a divorce, and there's a lot of story. He's had many, many hits in England, but he's also been in and out of rehabs, and he's just a real character. And I meet him. Sony, actually, as I'm leaving, introduces me to him. And about a year later, we became buddies, and he liked to fly fish, I liked to fly fish. And he used to come hear me play with my band, the Pretty Red Wing, because I have an ongoing just sort of relationship with a bunch of musicians, which sometimes we call the Pretty Red Wing Band.
Love it.
Through the years. And he loved our band. And he finally, he's one of the great guitar players like ever, rock guitar players. And he started bringing his Strat, and then he would get on stage and we'd play, and then he finally said, let's make a record together. So we made a record.
That was your duo, right?
Yeah, the duo called the Raphaels.
Yes.
Yes. So the thing about it is that in the relationship to the Chicks is that, Stuart was kind of starting up again. He was still opening in the summers for the Rolling Stones.
That's awesome.
Then we make this album, and he fell off the wagon. So, without dragging this way too far down.
Just things got the best of him.
He died.
Oh.
We released the album, and we went on our tour in Scotland, England, and Ireland. And
did you love this album y'all made?
Yeah, it's a beautiful album.
The Raphaels.
It's called Supernatural. It's a fantastic album.
And it's the Raphaels.
It's
the
duo.
Raphaels.
Yeah, it's a duo, but it has a couple members. There were some instruments. There are some guys from his band. I mean, mostly it's John Mock, John Gardner who played on the Fly tour. And a longtime buddy of mine, Mark Prentice on bass, and Daryl Scott played a bunch of things, and then it was Stuart and I.
Toured Europe.
Well, we started to, and then he
He got the best of him.
Yeah, and he actually went into DTs like alcohol shock kind of thing.
Okay.
And we couldn't finish the tour, and then I waited in Ireland for him, and he was hospitalized. He went into a coma, and it was very, very sad. Anyway, and again, I don't even talk about it too much, but I got back to the United States. I saw him one more time, and then he took his own life.
Dang.
Yeah, so it's terrible. And I think for me that was the end of trying to get record deals. I tell you that.
They closed that chapter for you?
By then I was 39. I might have been, I don't know, 39 or 42, and it was like I wasn't even that crazy about being on the road, but this was like some weird dark Fellini film or something, it was awful.
Because the music was amazing, but then the rest of it was kind of
well, it's dark. I mean, it doesn't get any darker. A guy that you're close to, and it occurred to me that, he grew up, of course, a lot of people suffer from addiction, and, I grew up in a family where that was part of our lives. And then, of course, my wife's work is, entirely an addiction. But, he lost that battle, and but he's also a kid that, by the time he was in his early 20s, he was playing at Wembley.
Wow.
Okay, so while I was playing down at Douglas Corner, I'm not
Right.
I'm not dogging Douglas Corner.
Right.
I cut my teeth on Douglas
And
Corner.
that's just a little dive bar
Mervyn,
in Nashville.
yeah, man, I love that place.
But Wembley's like the biggest
Well,
place
he's
you
playing
can
for
play.
75,000 people.
Wow.
And, when he played too, he was kind of a Scottish nationalist kind of vibe. I mean, in terms of the way people interpreted him, because very Scottish. He could play a guitar and make it sound like a bagpipe. He's really a remarkable musician. But I've seen that band play, and people wave flags like it's literally like they're going to war or something.
It's like a revival. People
it's a huge deal. Like he was a cult figure for a generation. And I think a lot of that is, a lot of that's really hard to
process.
How do you process? How do you just go home like, oh, great, I'll take the trash out
Kind
now.
of the same like you were saying with the Dixie Chicks. They blew up so big.
It's so big, that's the thing so you're asking, like what was that like? Yeah, it was heady, but it was a wave that wasn't my wave. It was like I was riding it, but they were on the surfboard and they were going somewhere, and I was just kind of there. It's part of my journey, and I love that I have to this day. They came, of course, as we all know, they finally have done a national tour. Now they're around the world, and when they came through town, I've remained really good friends with Marty, who I wrote those 2 songs with, and I've remained friends with the group, and they got tickets for my kids and my wife, and we went, and it was crazy. It was, I don't know if you were there.
The
but
love for the Dixie Chicks is out of this
it's
world.
It's intense, yeah, and they're up to it, in the sense that like they go out on stage and you go, all right, I remember. Particularly there's this moment in the show where they send the band away. Not that I don't love the band, I love the band. But they bring the band back, but in a completely acoustic place. And so Emily and Marty are playing. They're very good musicians, and everyone around them, and the kind of the way that the sound and the it's not just so massive you can't discern it.
You can hear the instruments.
You can really hear them in their voices and stuff, and you go, holy crap!
These guys
are
can
really.
play.
And this is what roots country.
These songs are great.
This is what this is the sleeping giant.
Yeah.
This can sell. This is the kind of thing that just
people.
takes over. And it's the kind of thing that brought, I got so many friends from where I went to school, like in New England and up. Everybody loved them. They didn't care a lick, whether or not it was country. They didn't, and they brought, it's funny too, because it brought a lot of people into country music who were like, oh, whoa, who's what?
Yeah.
Sara Evan's records, what, Patti Loveless, Sons of the
all
Desert,
of a sudden, people are checking out all this music.
Yeah, and that's what. But when you look at that music now, if you think about records now, if you listen to Fly, you have a Patty Griffin song, you have rock things, you have soul things, you have, there was an eclectic quality. Lyrics we're talking about, Cowboy Take Me Away is kind of a return to simplicity. Goodbye Earl is a great,
I love that song.
an amazingly funny piece of country writing, Oh man, Some Days You Want to Dance is just pure groove fun. It goes on and on.
Yeah.
And that, to some extent, not to be Mr. Critical, because I don't don't really want to, I think at times today, and I'm not at all the only person who said that, but there is a tendency towards, things being a bit similar, a little less diverse. And I don't think that's particularly healthy.
Sometimes things on the radio, people think, oh, let's just try to match the hits that are out there.
That's
instead
right.
of making a whole work of art that is actually authentic to the artist. Yeah.
Well, when you go to writing sessions and I see young kids who are coming up in the business saying, well, I've been studying beats per minute, assessing, taking the top 10 hits of the last year and then, looking at it like you're going to analyze it.
But it's a soul thing.
Well, to me it is, and I get I get it. Like I know that's one way to do. I mean, almost day one when I got to music out of college, I was at a studio in Carmel, California, and not Carmel. I'm sorry, but it was somewhere in the valley anyway. And I won't name the guy's name because this is not a happy reflection. But I remember him pulling me into the office, and he said, "Well, what you need to do is just take the top 10 songs on the chart, and this is in pop." And he said, "You should." Write down the chord progressions and then the lyric and then get a rhythm track that's exactly the same rhythm. Switch around the chords and take the basic subject matter and just make it your own. And he says, that's how you write.
Wow.
And yeah, so and listen, as a way of analyzing music that's popular at the time, of course that's, that's probably irrelevant. But it was exactly, anathema to what I wanted to do with my life. I mean, I don't care about any of that stuff.
You wanted to write from your soul.
Well, yeah, I mean, you sit around, you growing up listening to Cat Stevens and Joni Mitchell and Jimmy Webb songs or, Paul Simon. I mean, those guys, they they created a language. Were they affected by things? Of course they were. Absolutely. We always are. But, they were laying it out there. Neil Young records, oh, my God, sit around in front of a speaker and listen. Oh, man, take a look at my life. He was like 24 years old when he wrote that. But who cares? It was great. It's just unbelievable.
I love that. And I love that is where you come from. And I think that is what makes so many people drawn to your music because it is so soulful.
It keeps me not entirely successful, too.
No, it does. Oh, my gosh. Are you kidding me? Speaking of success, so we've had, One of These Days, Tim McGraw, Wynonna Judd, Only Love, Alabama, Cheat Seats, Brian White, Love is the Right Place. I love that song. Number one's Cowboy Take Me Away, Ready to Run, Dixie Chicks, Born to Fly, Sara Evans, and then Song of the Year, God Bless the Broken Road. I'm sure I am missing some. I mean, you are absolutely out of this world. Yeah, look at all this stuff I have written. Winning a Grammy for Rascal Flatts.
My eyes were better. I could read it.
You've written 6 musicals, an opera. You have 3 off-Broadway shows. The Warrior, The Piper, Tut. Off-Broadway. You also wrote a children's book, Anytime, Anywhere. Wrote a documentary, Lost Boy Home. I mean, there's so much with you. But I'm going to have to wrap you up.
Yeah, sure.
Because you could literally, I could talk to you for 27 hours.
That's very sweet.
Because your life,
I'm excited for you about what you're doing.
Well, I'm just excited that I get to interview you, that my job allows me to talk to someone like you because you're so interesting. But I like to wrap up with all of your life, all of these experiences, all of these countries, all of these artists you've worked with, all of these record deals, all of these highs, all of these lows, like even your wife, her ministries, the church. You have children, your sons. Levi, I know, he's getting into music.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
He's doing great.
Y'all wrote a great song together called Make It Love, which made a documentary.
We just sang it last night.
I love that. What was that documentary it's in?
Oh, it's a documentary called Two.
Two.
Yeah. About Desmond Child and Curtis Shaw's 2 sons. So that was a beautiful thing. Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm just even still scratching the surface. Your life is so deep and eclectic.
Mm-hmm.
I like to wrap up with Leave Your Light. Give me some inspiration on how you've been inspired and how you would like to inspire others. Like, what is that?
You got hard questions. Like? You give hard questions.
You got good answers, though.
Listen, if you're writing, it's, find yourself. I mean, be connected to your work. I mean, I think the thing that I tell younger writers, I'm old enough now that occasionally I get asked to, talk to groups and stuff. And I talk a lot about, for me, I think it's exciting to be passionate. I think it's exciting to even consider that if things aren't very good economically in the songwriting business, I'm co-producing and scoring a movie right now called The Last Songwriter about the terrible attrition we've had in our business over the last 10 years. We've lost 80% of our writers. And that'll be out. That's going to be a very interesting work, I think. But there's always, one should always be heartened because writing it's a gift, it's a joy, and it's really, to me, it's more of a calling. And I think that if you feel that way, a little poverty, frankly, is not going to hurt you either. I mean, there's something to be said about if you can simplify your life and focus your passion on the work you do, and make sure that it's honest. And what I mean by that is that that you're connected to it. Every song doesn't have to be about your autobiography. Like I can't write about a woman. I'm not a woman. I can't write about African Americans. I'm not African American. No, if you feel connected, just make sure you're connected. That would be my thing. There are a lot of ways to make a living in this business, all of which is great. I wish no ill upon anyone, but if you've got the love for this art form, and it is an art form, then I say, hold on to that passion and, just don't let that go, because the world needs songwriters, and it needs, I think songwriters are kind of like professional dreamers.
I love that.
And we are, that's our job. Our job is to go out and write, to be Leonard Cohen and write Suzanne or Hallelujah. That's what we need, and not everything has to be a ballad or novella too. We need, we need those rockers too.
Don't you feel like those songs that really touch people are the ones that come from that true place?
Yeah, absolutely. And the contrary is true as well. If something seems kind of thrown together like a demographic study or whatever, that I question whether or not it's going to have much impact, whether we're really going to sing those songs, years from now, or if we're going to bring them into our lives, whether we'll, laugh or cry or get married to them or sing them at funerals, or, these are the songs you want to be a part of. This is what it is about. This is because what you're doing is you're creating actual poetry for our time, and it may sound like, wow, you sure, this is actually, it's just do da da da. All I want to say to you, yeah, that's true. But you might as well accept the fact that our kids today, they grow up and they are, they may not know Shakespeare. They may not read classical literature. They may, but they may not. But I promise you this: they're all listening to records, and some of the best writers are really probably today are, rap artists, I think, just who are much freer, unless you have a Jason Isbell or something like that. And that is their literature. They may read a Maya Angelou book. They may pick up, some famous literature, some deep literature, but they are constantly, literally inhaling music. And so, I think it's real important that you kind of take it seriously and accept it as an unbelievably exciting profession.
I love that.
I sat there last night. I'll just end it with this. A good friend of all of ours, Andrew Dorff, died recently, and he was
great songwriter,
really wonderful songwriter, and really unique, really quirky guy. He'd been a published poet, a real character, and kind of, he had his stuff like we all do. But I remember, every time I wrote with him, I was struck by his authenticity and his intensity. And so last night, the community, and there is a community here, that's what's so beautiful, they gathered, and a bunch of us who wrote songs with him, we just spent 2 hours playing his songs. Now, some of these are, big songs, but there were others who came up and played songs. And Levi and I had written this song, Make It Love,
I love that song,
which was part of this movie and helped Levi get his deal. That's my son. And it's a beautiful song. and so much of it was Andrew. And I remember I was sitting there last night, pretty late for me, and I'm listening to everything, and you can feel the flow of the poet. Like all the songs were co-written, and yet
you can feel Andrew.
You can feel Andrew is literally in the room. I mean, spiritually, figuratively, however you want to look at it. But his presence was there, and that presence was beautiful. And and that's a real testimony. When you feel it in a room, and I was looking out. The place was packed, and all these faces, and the lyrics are delicate, but they're also broken, and they're, his life was kind of busted stuff, and it's hard to listen to sort of in a way, but then there's always sort of a weird screwed up light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, it's just a really interesting cat, and it's flowing out over the audience, and the faces were like wide open, like they were at church, like it's coming in. And I tell you what, if that's not something, if that's not important, I don't know what it is. And if you don't think that's important, then, maybe songwriting's not for you.
I love that.
That could be my final statement on the subject.
Marcus Hummon,
all right.
You are one in a million.
Thank you. So are you, young lady.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Bless you. You're the best.
You're the best.